I'm Nadia Jani and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Trump's ally and US conservative activist Charlie Kirk is shot dead at a university event. The UN Security Council will hold an emergency meeting over violation of Polish airspace. And France hit by nationwide protests and disruption as new Prime Minister takes office. Conservative commentator and Trump ally Charlie Kirk was shot dead and killed on Wednesday while speaking at a university in Utah. The 31-year-old was struck in the neck during the opening night of his American comeback tour. Officials are investigating what they call a targeted attack, while tributes and sharp reactions pour in from across the political spectrum.
Panic erupted at Utah Valley University on Wednesday, 10th September, when a single gunshot turned a public speaking event into a scene of horror. 31-year-old Charlie Kirk, a conservative commentator and one of President Donald Trump's closest allies, was struck fatally in the neck while addressing students.
Oh my God.
The Utah event was the opening night of Kirk's American Comeback Tour, a 15-campus series designed to spark debate among young Americans. At Utah Valley University, however, it became his final appearance.
Basically, I just heard a shot, and I saw him falling towards the left, so I knew he got shot on the collarbone or the neck right here, but I didn't see bleed immediately. I just saw and I heard, and we all crouched down.
It's traumatizing for the students. When I saw students running off from the campus over the bridge there, a lot of them were crying. It was traumatizing for everyone, and now the campus is closed.
Kirk was rushed from the scene as terrified spectators ducked for cover. Some even jumped into a fountain. Emergency crews and SWAT teams responded quickly. As the investigation unfolded, officials offered conflicting reports. The shooting unfolded before a crowd of about 3,000 people. FBI Director Kash Patel said a suspect was in custody, while Utah State Police said the gunman remained at large. An early arrest, George Zinn, was later dismissed as a mistaken identity. Authorities now say they are analyzing CCTV showing a suspect dressed in dark clothing. At Timpanogos Regional Hospital, where Kirk was pronounced dead, supporters gathered in mourning.
I'm here because free speech shouldn't be violated, because we shouldn't murder each other as Americans. We should listen to each other.
The fact that Charlie Kirk had to die because of his beliefs is just truly heartbreaking.
President Donald Trump also spoke out about political divisions in the country that have fueled violence.
Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loves so much, the United States of America. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country.
Former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and international leaders also condemned the attack. Charlie Kirk was a polarizing figure. On campuses and across social media, he divided opinion sharply. To supporters, he was a fearless defender of free speech, conservative values, and Donald Trump's vision for America. To critics, he was a provocateur, accused of fueling division and promoting a confrontational political agenda. Kirk rose from a suburban Chicago childhood to become founder of Turning Point USA, a conservative youth movement that reshaped campus politics and played a key role in Trump's 2024 election campaign.
The US marks the 24th anniversary since the deadly tragedy that stunned the world in 2001. As America pauses to remember the victims of 9/11 attack, we take a look back at the events of that day.
May God bless the victims, their families, and America.
On September 11th, 2001, the world watched in horror as hijacked passenger planes tore through the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center. The Pentagon in Washington, and brought down United Flight 93 in a Pennsylvania field. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil. Families, first responders, and ordinary citizens scarred by the tragedy. The images of that day, the collapsing towers, the panic in the streets, and the desperate rush to escape remain etched in memory. President George W. Bush, first informed of the attacks while visiting a school in Florida, vowed that terrorism against America would not stand as the nation entered a new uncertain chapter.
Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
The attacks claimed by Al-Qaeda reshaped the world, sparking the US-led war on terror, the invasion of Afghanistan, and later the war in Iraq. Conflicts that defined a generation and claimed countless more lives. 24 years on, the world pauses once again to honor the dead.
A Russian drone strike has damaged a school in the northern Ukrainian city of Sumy, according to Ukrainian authorities. The state emergency service reported the attack happened overnight, sparking a fire that destroyed part of the building. Nearby homes and vehicles are also hit, and images from the scene showed shattered windows and fire damage in a classroom. As of now, no casualties have been reported. Finland's President Alexander Stubb has arrived in Kyiv and met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The two leaders paid tribute at a memorial wall for fallen soldiers before beginning talks. According to Ukraine's presidential office, discussions between the two presidents will take place during the visit and will be centered on security projects, European integration, infrastructure, investments, and long-term security guarantees. The UN Security Council will hold an emergency meeting after Poland's airspace was violated by Russian drones. Officials say the meeting will address the growing threats along NATO's eastern border. Here's more.
At Poland's request, the UN Security Council will hold an emergency meeting to address Russia's violation of Polish airspace. The country has also introduced restrictions on air traffic along its eastern borders with Belarus and Ukraine, following multiple drone incursions a day earlier. The developments come as Prime Minister Donald Tusk visited a military base in Lask, stressing both the importance of Allied commitments and the need to modernise the country's air force.
I am convinced that in some sense, this lesson from last night should be a very strong argument for you, not only on your behalf, but also for Poland in our talks with all allies. I will do everything I can. I will bend over backwards to ensure this, so that what we need today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, not in the next 8 to 10 years, reaches Poland, and that you too have increasingly modern and reliable equipment.
Early on Wednesday, Poland shot down multiple drones in its airspace with the support of NATO aircraft, marking the first known time a member of the alliance has fired in response during Russia's war in Ukraine. Airports including Chopin, Modlin, Rzeszów and Lublin temporarily closed before reopening. Moscow denied responsibility, while a senior diplomat in Poland said the drones came from the direction of Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry said the drones targeted military sites in western Ukraine, not Poland. NATO and European leaders condemned the breach, with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz calling it part of a series of Russian provocations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described the incursion as deliberate. In the eastern village of Wielkie Wola, pensioner Tomasz Wesolowski was downstairs watching TV when a drone crashed into the roof of his house.
I turned on the TV and all the news was about this massive drone flight, and after a while I heard a plane flying over, and suddenly it seemed to descend more rapidly and the roar grew louder, and suddenly something boomed. The light fell from the ceiling in the downstairs living room. I looked out the window and there were sheets of metal flying from the roof.
Neighbours also described shock and fear.
And suddenly, I heard what sounded like an explosion. I jumped up and my legs started shaking. I started looking because I heard a plane flying overhead. I couldn't identify it, or rather, locate it. So I went out onto the upstairs balcony and saw it was flying towards Ladawa.
Residents say the attack has revived memories of past wars and left many anxious about the future. The incident is considered the most serious violation of NATO airspace since Russia's war in Ukraine began.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko met in Minsk with John Cole, a US representative of President Donald Trump, for talks that lasted nearly 5 hours, his press service said. Lukashenko praised Trump's role in easing global tensions, calling him a president who has done more than any other to promote peace. As a gesture of goodwill, Lukashenko also pardoned 14 foreign citizens convicted of crimes including espionage and extremism. The group included Lithuanians, Latvians, Polish, German and one French national. Thousands took to the streets in France under the slogan "Block Everything," disrupting transport and schools. Authorities report hundreds were detained and several police officers injured, while organisers warn the protests are only just beginning.
Thousands took to the streets across France under the slogan "Block Everything," a protest movement that began online earlier this year. The demonstrations, fueled by social, economic, environmental and political grievances, expressed broad opposition to government policies. The movement first emerged on Telegram and is believed to be organised by the group Les Essentiels France. It has grown rapidly online, spreading to platforms like TikTok and X, with over 338,000 tweets about the movement shared in August alone. Known for its anti-EU and sovereigntist stance, the movement has gained widespread attention, with a majority of French citizens expressing support for its protests.
I'm here because this illegitimate government must be blocked. We don't want a war market, we don't want austerity. We want money for public services, we want money for schools, for hospitals.
The protests across France are driven by opposition to austerity, public spending cuts, Bayrou's collapsed budget plan, Macron's economic policies, rising defence spending, and calls from unions and left-wing activists for more funding for public services, schools and hospitals.
It's the same. It's Macron who's the problem, not the ministers. He has to go. He has to think about it seriously.
It is reported that the French Interior Ministry had anticipated around 100,000 protesters and deployed 80,000 police and gendarmes across the country. By the end of the day, the ministry said 200,000 people had participated, while labour unions estimated the turnout at over 250,000. French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau, speaking after a meeting to assess the day of protests, noting that the Block Everything protests had failed to bring the country to a standstill.
What are the major lessons to be learned from this very, very long day? It began at dawn and once again it continues. First, perhaps the thwarting of those who wanted to blockade the country. Well, we thwarted that strategy and France was not blocked by the blockaders.
Authorities reported hundreds of incidents across cities including Paris, Rennes, Nantes, Grenoble, Lyon, Lille, Caen and Toulouse. In the southwest, rail traffic was disrupted after power lines were cut, and many schools experienced delays or closures.
We will now dig in further into the strikes on Doha. Qatar's Prime Minister has described the action as barbaric. Israel, however, remains resolute, insisting on the mission to neutralize threats posed by Hamas in order to ensure that no safe haven exists for the planning and orchestration of future attacks. a stance framed as essential to its national security. Joining me now to discuss these developments is Ambassador Michael Oren from US Ambassador to Israel. Hello.
Good to be with you.
My first question is, Prime Minister Netanyahu has issued a stark warning. If Qatar does not expel Hamas members from its territory, Israel will act unilaterally. What might such an action entail, do you think? And are we likely to see further targeted operations?
Can't rule it out, of course. And it's interesting, there's a great amount of international condemnation of Israel's actions 2 days ago. But within Israel itself, the action is very popular. The sense is that these Hamas leaders had literally gotten away with mass murder, and that Israel as a state goes to the very meaning of the state, exists to ensure that Jewish blood would never be shed with impunity. The United States went after Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. The fact that murderers are in a different country does not give them immunity from retribution. So in Israel, very popular. As to what Israel's future steps would be in striking out at these terrorist leaders, I think those are open, and Israel has I think a very varied and sophisticated arsenal for defending ourselves.
And some observers have suggested that we are now witnessing the unraveling of a cooperative relationship between Israel and Qatar. Do you believe this rift is repairable, and is there anything Israel or its allies could do to de-escalate tensions?
I think that Qatar could evict the Hamas leaders, ensure that they do not operate on Qatari soil. Qatar, interestingly enough, was one of the first Gulf countries to establish financial, economic ties with the state of Israel, starting in the 1990s. And those were only broken off in the wake of the first Gaza-Israel war in 2008-2009. So for a long time, Qatar can go back. Qatar can join the Abraham Accords. We'd certainly welcome them into the Abraham Accords. But Qatar has to change its way of operating. That includes praising terror, building up terror through the Al Jazeera media network, which is now illegal in the state of Israel, and certainly cutting all ties with radical Islamic terrorist groups, not just Hamas, it's also the Muslim Brotherhood.
To what extent do you think then Israel anticipated the diplomatic cost of this operation?
Well, there is definitely a diplomatic cost. I don't know how much they took it into consideration. I think there was a greater confidence on the success of the operation. That remains very much questioned. As of this moment, nobody is saying, not the Qataris, not Hamas, who, if anybody, among the senior Hamas officials were killed in this operation. The funeral today, and they didn't release the names of the people who were being buried. So we don't know whether this operation achieved the goal of truly exacting that type of retribution from Hamas, but it does send an unequivocal message. That is the gaze of the murdering of Jews without a price for the murdering of Jews, in fact.
And what is the broader regional picture to all of this, and how does this align with Israel's wider strategic vision under the Abrahamic Accords?
I think we have to distinguish between what leaders in this region say and what they actually feel. I don't think that among the region there's a tremendous amount of love for Qatar. There are many, many years of sort of very profound tensions between Qatar and other Gulf countries, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and there's certainly no love between these leaderships and Hamas and its mother organization, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, which is viewed as a dire threat by these regimes. So while these regimes may condemn Israel's actions, I think the leaders of our countries, members of the Abraham Accords, would not exactly feel sorry for the passing of these Hamas leaders on Qatari soil.
Do you think Qatar will actually heed what Israel has said in regards to evicting all Hamas senior leaders from their country in order to stop further conflict?
I think they must. I mean, Qatar, it's raison d'etre. Okay, it is to exert influence to the world by peaceful means. By one report in the American press that the Qataris have spent something in the order of $100 billion in recent years to influence the United States, and gifts to lobbyists, gifts to universities in particular. They invest very heavily, as I said earlier, in media and Al Jazeera. They're not looking for conflict. They want to be able to play a role as peacemaker. Can't play a role for peacemaker if they're harboring terrorists. And Israel is signaling that day is gone, that era is gone, And if Qatar wants to be a peaceful neighbor, it's going to have to play by these new rules, which is you do not ally with terrorists.
And where do we stand now in regards to negotiations with Hamas and the release of the hostages and a ceasefire?
Well, the Trump administration had put a package on the table. According to that package, there was to be a 60-day ceasefire, followed by negotiations toward prolonging that ceasefire, the release of a certain number of Palestinian terrorist prisoners from Israeli jails. But the real the innovation of this package was that all of Israel's hostages were released on the first day. Now, one has to proceed on the assumption that Hamas does not want to release all the hostages. Hamas is evil, but it's not stupid, and it knows that the minute you release the last hostage, that Israel then can go into Gaza and uproot Hamas. So they're always going to try to hold on to a few hostages. So Hamas quite predictably said to the Americans, the American mediator, to Steve Witkoff, saying, well, this is interesting, we're going to study it, and we're going to ask questions. And, Donald Trump doesn't play by those rules. He wants a yes or a no. And I think that Trump has also had it with Hamas. And it's not just Trump, but even the previous administration, the Biden administration, said that Hamas bore the bulk of the responsibility for the failure of hostage release negotiations. But people were pretty fed up. And this is signals, I think Israel signaled that that type of foot dragging is not going to be allowed anymore, is very important and can actually help with the hostage release negotiations. It'll be very interesting to see what Hamas comes back with now, whether they'll try again to say to President Trump, well, we like this, but we're going to ask you a lot of questions. Maybe the questions will disappear.
And my final question, with the anniversary of the attack approaching next month, is there mounting pressure on President Netanyahu to do more in regards to a ceasefire and a releasing of the hostages?
Well, there's definitely pressure. A large majority of Israelis would like to see the end of this war, even at the cost of not completely destroying Hamas. And I think if you ask the question in a more detailed way, do you want to end the war if Hamas comes out and regains control of Gaza and once again threatens the Israel border and once again sends rockets into our cities? I think that number goes down very, very significantly. But still, Israel's tired. Our army is tired. We have reservist corps that has served hundreds of days in combat. These are people who they're not children. People leave their families, leave their businesses, leave their homes, and they're definitely tired. So yes, the society would like to see an end to the war. We'd like to see the hostages released, of course, and we'd like to see Hamas demilitarized, Gaza demilitarized, and Hamas leaders exiled to some third country. That would be the ideal outcome. It is yet to be seen how this can be achieved. The Israeli army is now poised to enter into the last bastion of Hamas control in Gaza, that is Gaza City. This promises to be a very difficult battle indeed, with high costs, both to the civilian population, to Israeli soldiers, and perhaps to the hostages themselves. That's a great fear here. To be very honest with you, I'm not a representative of the Israeli government, but I will tell you that there's no good way of proceeding here. There's only more nightmarish ways of proceeding. And hopefully the Israeli government will choose the least of all these evils.
Thank you so much for joining me, Ambassador Oren. Thank you. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Now to Turkey. Turkey's Minister of National Defense, Yasser Güler, has paid an official visit to Vietnam. He traveled to Hanoi at the invitation of his counterpart, Phan Van Giang. On the first day of the visit, Güler laid a wreath at the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum and observed a moment of silence in remembrance. Later, he was welcomed with a military ceremony at the Vietnamese Ministry of Defense. Güler signed the ministry's Book of Honor and held talks with Phan Van Giang in the presence of both delegations. The minister also visited the Turkish embassy in Hanoi, where he was briefed on the mission's activities. As part of the program, Güler was received by Vietnamese President Luong Quang. Turkish prosecutors have ordered the detention of 10 people in a major investigation into Can Holding on the charges of organised crime, fraud, smuggling and money laundering, with major firms also targeted. Istanbul Gendarmerie teams raided the suspects' homes, seizing several large companies Prosecutors said financial reports showed large sums of unidentified money were moved through Can holding companies, concealed through complex transactions and false documents to reduce taxes. Now, Georgia's upcoming local elections will take place next month without international observers from the OSCE. The organisation says the Georgian government's last-minute invitation made effective observation impossible. Our correspondent reports from the capital.
The OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, the main European election observation body, explained that a credible mission requires early preparation and access to all stages of the electoral process. With the Georgian government's invitation arriving less than a month before election day, the office announced it will not deploy observers. This setback comes against the backdrop of growing political tensions in Georgia. Just days ago, the Ministry of Internal Affairs expanded its investigation into a violent confrontation outside the headquarters of ruling party figure Kahak Aladze. The case now includes charges of violence during pre-election agitation. Opposition voices warn of deeper risks. Lelo's Strong Georgia leader Tazo Datunashvili compared the current climate to the early 1990s, accusing the ruling party of staging civil conflict and dehumanizing opponents. Former President Salome Zurabishvili, speaking from Washington, dismissed the October 4 vote as nothing more than a simulation of elections, criticizing the opposition's divisions over whether to participate or not. With the OSCE now stepping back, Georgia faces its October 4 elections under greater scrutiny than ever, both from its own citizens and from the international community. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
Armenia's parliament speaker, Alen Simonyan, says economic ties and infrastructure are now central to the post-peace agenda with Azerbaijan. He signals a shift towards practical cooperation after years of regional tension. Here's more.
Alen Simonyan has shared thoughts on future cooperation with Azerbaijan following the recent peace declaration signed in Washington. Speaking to journalists, Simonyan said it is understandable that Azerbaijan wants to avoid any future threats. He added that Armenia also has clear priorities, especially when it comes to unblocking regional transport and communication links.
In a very short period of time, Armenians and Azerbaijanis will be trading with each other, and we will have a common market of Armenian and Azerbaijani goods. Azerbaijani products will appear in our shops, while Armenian goods will be found in shops in Baku and other cities. It's inevitable. Armenians will go to buy cheaper petrol and come back.
Simonyan highlighted the importance of the so-called Trump route, a section of the Zangezur corridor that will run through Armenia. He suggested that Armenian companies could help build the railway and energy infrastructure along this route. He also said a joint Armenian-American organization will be responsible for managing these projects. Simonyan also addressed Armenia's security ties. He confirmed that Armenia is not planning to remove the Russian military base from its territory. According to him, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan will travel to Russia soon and is expected to meet President Vladimir Putin. Recently, Armenian and Azerbaijani deputy prime ministers met in border areas last week. They discussed border delimitation, mine clearance and plans for rebuilding infrastructure. These efforts aim to support the peace deal signed in August, which was mediated by US President Donald Trump.
In Central Asia, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, is in Kazakhstan for a state visit. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev hosted Tshisekedi at the presidential palace for talks on expanding economic and cooperation on international security. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimazana has more.
An official welcoming ceremony was held at Akorda for the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who arrived in Kazakhstan on a state visit. For Kazakhstan, the DRC is considered a key partner on the African continent, with a population of over 110 million and significant natural and human resources. The country is becoming more active on the international stage. According to President Tokayev, expanding cooperation with African countries is now one of the priorities in Kazakhstan's foreign policy. President Tshisekedi said his visit aims not only to build bilateral relations, but also to promote stronger ties between Africa and Central Asia as a whole. A key focus is cooperation in natural resource processing. The DRC is rich in cobalt and copper, while Kazakhstan holds large uranium reserves. According to global data, the DRC accounts for 76% of the world's cobalt production and 14% of copper. Tshisekedi emphasized that both countries have a real opportunity to develop joint processing projects directly on their own soil. This, he said, could open the door to new economic growth and long-term cooperation. Despite the 8,000-kilometer distance, economic ties between Kazakhstan and the DRC are gradually developing. Diplomatic relations were officially launched in 2022. In last year, trade between the two countries reached nearly $5 million. Kazakhstan exports tools, equipment, machinery and chemical products, while importing rare metal ores, coffee, plastics and IT components from Africa. Cooperation between the two countries goes beyond just trade. In 2022, Kazakhstan sent its military personnel to the Democratic Republic of the Congo as part of a United Nations peacekeeping mission. If the two countries continue to find common ground, geography will no longer be a barrier, especially as their partnership already goes far beyond economics. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A News.
Moving to Afghanistan, where the UN has launched a 4-month emergency response plan worth $140 million to assist nearly 500,000 people affected by the recent devastating earthquake. Our Tamim Bahis has more on that in Kabul.
The earthquake struck Kunar, Laghman and Nangarhar provinces with a magnitude above 6, followed by 3 strong aftershocks. More than 2,200 people lost their lives and around 3,600 were injured. Over 6,700 homes were either destroyed or damaged, leaving thousands of families displaced in unsafe and makeshift shelters. Many households also lost their food supplies and now face limited access to clean water, health services and sanitation. Schools, clinics and essential infrastructure were also badly affected. The United Nations emergency plan aims to reach 457,000 people by the end of the year. Relief operations have already begun, with humanitarian organizations and local authorities delivering food, tents, blankets, warm clothing and clean water. Mobile health and nutrition teams are being deployed along with medical supplies to the worst hit areas. Humanitarian partners are focusing on the needs of vulnerable groups, including women and children, while also preparing communities in high altitude areas for the winter season. The plan includes shelter support, water and sanitation, food assistance, protection services, education, and agriculture and livestock aid to help safeguard lives and livelihoods. The United Nations is calling for urgent international support to ensure families impacted by the earthquake receives life-saving assistance before winter sets in. Tamim Bahis reporting for A News from Kabul, Afghanistan.
That's all we have for now. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with another update. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.